if he like just like screws over Yura to help the Sword Saint out.
Oh my god, shut up. Stop it. Stop.
Welcome back to the Hishaku Hideout, a weekly podcast where we talk about the latest chapter and everything Kagurabachi. I'm here with Dice.
What's up, everyone?
And today we're getting the big chapter 100, and just gotta say, Hokuzono executed the reveal of the Sword Saint's name and just the weight of this chapter, like, flawlessly.
Yeah, dude. Big 100. We don't even need Chihiro and Samura. It's all the Sword Saint, which... yeah, it's, it's a big reveal definitely for the big 100. So I just kind of put that together. And yeah, we also know, where the Sword Saint, where the chapter starts, the Sword Saint is officially being held up in the dungeon, the lowest level of Kamunabi headquarters.
Yeah, and it seems like it's way down there the way they kind of frame it too. It's like deep down below compared to like where they're already at like the lowest accessible level, but they got him in the shitter down below. I mean, rightfully so, because we see what kind of person he is.
Yeah, we see that Yura and him, they have a little talk. Yura's even surprised that he's not as crazy as they say he is, which I told you I was a bit surprised by, because this is the same guy that went to Samura with the receipts about how the Kamunabi lied. So could he also not have at least, kept an open mind about the Sword Saint? That's why like a couple of episodes and chapters ago, I was thinking that he might be thinking to team up, or, he might be wanting to team up with the Sword Saint, which is kind of what we potentially might get in the future, is what is hinted at in this chapter. Not to get, way ahead of myself, but we see that they're talking. Sword Saint is like stretching, testing out his senses. What's your takeaway from this conversation?
It's interesting that like he is now switching up just by the fact of the Sword Saint is of right mind. His mental acuity just in general is like he's built different, literally, because throughout these 18 years of basically be alive through these like pillars, you would think that he's kind of, just no sense of like self. He's just kind of clicked out, tuned out of reality. But it's not just that. I mean, we see this motherfucker's doing vocal exercises. He's doing calisthenics. He's stretching. We'll talk more about it later, but I don't think it really pairs or bodes well for Yura's fate. By the way, this is a conversation has gone. Yura wanted to kill him because he believed the Sword Saint did the malediction, because he lost control. He just clicked out and wasn't himself. But when he sees that the Sword Saint was like, no, he's like, I did it, kind of like Yuji against Higuruma. But he actually was the one who did it, and not like a Sukuna thing in Shibuya. That alone is what sways the entire plan of Yura. So it does make me wonder, like, Yura's goal, how much of that, like what percentage of that is actually for like the greater good of his country. I think it does play more into like wanting to be the superpower of a nation. I don't know, but like, what'd you make of their back and forth?
Yeah, like Sword Saint's demeanor is definitely eye-catching, to say the least, in terms of like, it's definitely surprising, like you said, because it seems to me that more than anything, he's a bit intrigued by Yura. He asks him who he is. He clearly doesn't know anything about him, but he has to be, I would think, somewhat surprised by what this guy has been able to accomplish, this random, from what he knows, right? So to me, I feel like he's at least intrigued enough to hear him out. But yeah, how probable is this team up, right? We can get into some of the theory crafting later on. What I think is a bit more noteworthy right now is we can pretty safely assume that Yura isn't like from Shikoku or anything like that. Previously, when he went to Samura and he was talking about Japan using words like us, it could be interpreted as like him trying to sway Samura. But there was always like this kind of conversation and underlying theory about like whether Yura and some of the Hishaku members could be from Shikoku and revenge and all that. But like, no, this is, like you said, it very much is about maintaining a superpower or building a different kind of superpower, right? Which is what Kazan wanted. His views aligned with Yura, and now Yura at least thinks that aligns with what the Sword Saint wants. But I'm not so sure that's the case. Yeah, the Sword Saint wanted these people wiped out, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's the type of guy that wants to build I don't know. I mean, we know that he says he wanted to protect this country and its people, but I don't know. I feel like we still don't know enough about him. We know that Yura's the type of guy that wants to be leader. He wants to be king. Is Sword Saint that type of guy, though? That's what I want to know.
Does feel like just the atmosphere of this chapter and the panel presence and the presentation of like what Hokuzono gave us, it kind of feels more like Yura is starting to like side more with like the Sword Saint and them together, but the Sword Saint is more like wondering who this guy is. You know, the Sword Saint seems like it's now like he's the one with the trick up his sleeve, but it seems like people are taking Yura for his word in this chapter, which, you know, like I said, could very well be the case. The chess match may not be over between Yura and the Sword Saint. Oh,
I see what you're saying now. But do you think that Yura is not being honest here?
Even though we've gotten these like reveals or like answers to certain questions, which we have to talk about the Sword Saint's relation to Chihiro, but even with these reveals, there's still just more questions now. It's like hard for me to make like a full stand, but I just think I'm okay with taking Yura's words here, but it's hard for me to not lean on the fact of him being somewhat skeptical of this whole like, you know, first conversation between the two. Yeah,
you know what? As I was like listening to you, like you might be onto something, because when Yura approached Samura, he said he wanted to stop the malediction, correct?
Yeah.
And we took him at his word then, at least I did, and that is not what he's trying to do. So yes, deceit is definitely not above or below whatever you want to say, like Yura. Like, he is very much capable of deceit. And yeah, you know what, like I actually like I do like what you're pointing out here, because if Yura kind of goes out because of some tomfoolery like this, where he just kind of like, you know, is naive to this sort of thing, it would be very unlike how he's been moving. And I also am really 50-50 on whether Yura is gonna die here, because as much as I can see this as like the perfect setup for the Sword Saint, like I said, I am a bit introduced that he's being introduced now. And the way, like, I don't know, like I have mixed emotions on whether this is about to be Yura's exit, because I can also see a situation where like this is him just getting started. But also I don't know how that team up would look like, because if he is honest about them teaming up, that means he doesn't get to wield the Shinuchi. And so why would a guy with a lot more power take orders from him? Which again, this might point towards what you're saying. Maybe he's just trying to cozy up to him and then just backstab him. Which, hey, if we're gonna see some backstabbing, I'd rather it be Yura to Sword Saint than Sword Saint to Yura. Yeah.
I don't think we're walking away this arc with both of them working together personally. But just saying a scenario where they do, it's hard pressed for me to like look at the other Hishaku members and them just like choosing to align to a new leader just by how we see how devoted they are to Yura. But there's one outlier to this in the Hishaku, and that's Hatshaku. He's ranks above the rest of the members of the Hishaku. You know, like he's the only one not there really risking his life. You know, the Sword Saint, I think his introduction has been so different than I think a lot of us expected, you know. But before we jump into that, I think we're just going to get deep on that. Let's talk about his relation to Chihiro, and I'll let you touch on that.
Yeah, so I guess it could, the proper thing would probably be to point out that unfortunately, again, or, it's not that it happens all that much with Kagurabachi specifically, but we English readers often get the short end of the stick when it comes to this, and I'm talking about the mistranslation when it comes to the brother. So it turns out he's Kunishige's brother-in-law. Specifically, I read that the Japanese translation indicates that he is the younger brother of Chihiro's mom, presumably what would have been Kunishige's wife. So that is the relation, the first family member aside from Kunishige that we see Chihiro has, and presumably the one family member he still has left. So,
I'm really interested to seeing a conversation between the Sword Saint and Shiba. Now that we know just how close, they each were like very close to Kunishige, just like the roles that they played, in Kunishige's life. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Chihiro looks like when he finds out that this person is, a relative of his, and not only is he a relative, Kunishige entrusted, this important like figure in his life with like the strongest sword. And the conversation we get in this chapter, specifically like the weight of it, is about him, not being compelled by the Magatsumi, but off of his like ideals, based on his beliefs and ideals, to kill 200,000 people to protect his country and its people. We were really big on seeing how Chihiro would find out about the 200,000 lives that were taken by the Magatsumi. That kind of reignited in me after this chapter, because now I feel the same way. But now, how is Chihiro going to take that when he finds out that his uncle is, the one that did it? And not only that, he wasn't like tainted. He did it based off of his own, creed, his own like, morals, his own beliefs and ideology.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the reveal of the malediction and the 200 lives lost on Shikoku, and how we were just a bit upset that we didn't get that reveal in like real time, like more like Chihiro's reaction, and that it turned out that he already knew and we were the ones that didn't know that he knew. So at the time I remember like us voicing our opinions about how we wanted that to have been handled or would have preferred. And I kind of would feel silly if I do the same thing here. Like, I don't know if it's just like a reaction, right, to that. Yeah. But like, is there, and please, if I'm forgetting something, let me know. Is there a chance that Chihiro could already know this too? Because like, now I'm like, I wouldn't like to see that, right? Like, let me just say that. Like, I definitely have been very vocal about like Chihiro, like Chihiro's obstacles and how he comes to terms with things like we saw versus Hirohiko, that kind of stuff. And like with Sojo, that's what I get a huge kick out of. And so when we didn't get that with the malediction, I kind of was left wanting that, and I hope we get it here. But also part of me is like, does he know this too? Does he know this too? I don't think so. Right? And I hope not. But I just can't help but like not have that expectation now.
Yeah, because I believe when he faces Samura, he does say like, Shiba told me everything. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be true. Agreed. Like Shiba could have just been holding back certain things to like try and, save Chihiro, like the like realization of just, who did that. He's now aware of like, what Kunishige had to like endure in this time. And, now it's like, oh, your uncle, because of your uncle and his actions of his own volition, caused your dad these 15 years of depression and like trauma, to have to like sleep, basically go to lay his head on the pillow at night and just think of these like unreal like horrors committed by one of his creations was done by his brother-in-law. I could see Shiba trying to save him from that, and you do have a point though. Like don't make don't make this up in my head, like, you know, kind of we did that to the first time. You know, just take it as something to be mindful of and just see how it like gets flushed out going forward. But man, there's a lot in this chapter that just had me thinking back to like a lot of our past conversations. It makes me think about Kagurabachi and like where it's headed differently than I did, you know, up to this point. And chapter 100 is, you know, a dope, you know, big milestone, especially in Shonen Jump these days with the axe. But I like these next 100 chapters. I really, my grasp of the series of like where it could possibly lead to is like, you know, distorted now. But like in a good way, not necessarily good or bad, I should say, but more just along the lines of like the possibilities for the series is now like wider, you know, because Hokuzono is like kind of introduced like, you know, a lot of potential, you know, character dynamics here with Chihiro and the Sword Saint, and just the fact the Sword Saint himself being so like of sound mind.
You know, bro, and I feel like that's something that not only has Hokuzono, I feel like, has done throughout most of Kagurabachi, and it's a big reason why it's so good, but especially in this current arc, we've talked about a lot of things being pretty straightforward, right? The Kazan reveal was straightforward. The Yukisada reveal being the vessel was pretty straightforward. I got it wrong in regards to Azami. Doesn't mean that, you know, he couldn't die later on. but yeah, like he did kind of get us there. And so while some things have been pretty straightforward, I think other things have been laid out in a way where they could go in like one in a million ways, and not just like one in a million random ways, but one in a million ways that actually make sense and could progress the story forward in a way that is intriguing and exciting and all that, right? Like if Azami, for example, would have been dead, at least me personally, I wouldn't have issues. But his comeback, and I might be getting just a bit ahead of myself again, but his comeback was definitely exciting to see. As much as a Yura glazer that I am, it was cool to see Azami come back, like he says, like a demon. So I do enjoy how Hokuzono lays things out in a way that a lot of times are really straightforward, but other times there's just so many there's so many options that even when there's like that straightforward path, like with the traitor reveal, you just can't help but to wonder, but is it this? Is it that? Could it be this other thing that could potentially lead into this other bigger reveal? So I think it's just credit to Hokuzono and how he's laid out this story and its world building so far.
It can go many different ways for a lot of different reasons. And, you know, that's kind of a generic way of saying that he's given himself a lot of avenues. You know, he can always use these like reveals that even Chihiro doesn't know, even though he presumes to know, like, you know, everything that happened regarding the war. You know, there's still the two other sword bearers that we didn't get to meet really yet. And there's still a lot of things with like Shiba, Yura's origin, who the Sword Saint really is, and why exactly did Kunishige pick him. Also playing that when we look at Chihiro specifically, right? Is this story going to turn into more about Chihiro righting the wrongs of the past? Or is it going to be more about just him, you know, doing his damnedest to just, you know, be on this revenge plot while maintaining a semblance of like these happy, heartfelt, warm moments that he has of his father. And I think where we're kind of seeing and where it's headed might just be more about like the past of, the actual catalyst of all the trauma, I should say, of the past, which is the Sword Saint. Chihiro finally putting an end to him himself. You know, now that in and of itself, even though I think it's leaning that way, like in talking about the world that Hokuzono's crafted, you know, with war plots, you know, war. When you talk about like the war, anything dealing with war, it can be very tough and heavy things. So it's hard to like fully like nail the execution of. just because it's so like weighted, you know, you don't want to spend too much time on a certain like thing, but you also don't want to spend not enough time to give it its proper like continuity throughout the entire story. And I think that's always been like tough for me, because like even when I say all this, like I'm thinking about, my mind's racing on like all these different scenarios now. And I know where I'm like leaning towards that doesn't necessarily have to be true, because you brought up a good point about a lot of the reveals have been straightforward, especially this arc. And that doesn't, have to be the case, but, like only time will tell when we see like more sample writing from Hokuzono, like in a serialization format. But basically I'm just yapping, but really it's more just like thinking about like this the world and this like big war, what happened in the war to end it. Now we go 18 years ahead. These heroes now have their own children, or they're the new generation is paying for the folly of the past. And I think the Sword Saint and just how he was introduced kind of just lends itself to me thinking that he is the final villain, and what started how the series started essentially, or like the initiator of all the plot. It's going to also end with him, which I think is kind of a very straightforward leap in thought to have, especially because like, I mean, we don't talk about it here because it's already stated a bunch. We know if the Sword Saint dies, the Sword Bearers will also die, within a certain time, whatever that time may be. So obviously when me and you talk about Yura killing the Sword Saint, we are aware of, the others like Subaru and the other female sword bearer would just, most likely pass away without ever getting any present time paneling of them, and us like meeting them through their current actions as they sit with the weight of the Shikoku mishap. Like, because we don't, I've noticed a lot of comments. I want to bring this up briefly, that we don't really outright talk about that, but me and Dice obviously are aware that the sword bearers are all tied to the Sword Saint. And I think now that the Sword Saint is even more cognizant of everything, and the fact that he is very charismatic on panel, to be honest with you, he's gonna walk away from this, which will also give us more exposition, more like plot relevance to the other two sword bearers. But I'm sorry, I'm kind of yapping, but that's just one thing I did want to touch on real quick.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason why I don't think you'd be able to find and like at any point that I ever say, like, put my foot down and say like, oh, Yura's about to kill the Sword Saint. I'm pretty sure I've never said that, because I haven't thought it's gonna happen. I've actually quite the opposite.
I don't mean to cut you. I think it's more just how me and you ride for Yura. I should say it's more like based. Of course. Yeah, because that does all. Me and Dice are more down for like what makes sense in the story and Hokuzono's vision, more so than any Hishaku glaze or Yura glaze. I should have said that. My bad.
No, but I know that you know that, but just for for the viewers or listeners that aren't exactly sure, like, I've been pretty paranoid, like even in my main channel, about like the Sword Saint just coming in and stealing Yura's thunder. Like, I've been pretty vocal about like being pretty worried about that, because I do think that's more likely than Yura backstabbing the Sword Saint, right? Like, that could still happen in a very unique way, where like Hokuzono could get very creative in how he could kind of bypass the sword bearers dying. I don't mean like the Sword Saint dies and like the contract, like the others don't die. I mean like Yura kind of getting his way without necessarily killing the Sword Saint. Again, I don't know how that would look like, right? Because I know that his intention is to wield the Magatsumi, but I don't know. Anything is kind of on the table right now. And like I said, just if I didn't make it clear enough, I do think kind of the Sword Saint is like you, Tiberius. I do think the Sword Saint is more likely to come on top here. I think there's a good chance, and I'll just say this right here, that Azami creates the perfect window of opportunity for the Sword Saint to get his hands on Magatsumi again. And I think to me, that's what I think is most likely right now. I don't think Azami is strong enough to beat Yura right now, but I think all that needs to happen is Yura to let go of Magatsumi, and that somehow Magatsumi gets into the Kensei's hand, and it's GG's from there, because guess what? Everyone's fucked, you know? Unless the Sword Saint is willing to take up Yura on that offer, hey, I'm here for it. I just don't think it's gonna happen, man.
I'd rather Yura die than become like a secondhand fiddle to the Sword Saint.
Well, that's the thing. If anything, I would feel like the Sword Saint would be Yura's enforcer. Yura's the one that knows how to make the moves. Sword Saint just a guy with a sword. And
that's unless Yura is actually from Shikoku.
That's what I don't think he is. He just
yeah. I mean, I don't think we can say 100%.
He approves of the malediction, bro.
Well, no, Yura, I mean, don't get me wrong here, and this could just sound like Coke.
Deceiving him. Okay.
Because he does say something about like that day. I forget what his exact wording was, but he says that day basically told me, or he came to his conclusion on that day.
That's a good shout. That's a good,
and
yeah, it's true.
It's, he might be from Shikoku, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he agreed with how Shikoku, what they were doing or whatever, or and maybe he looks at like the Magatsumi and the Enchanted Blades as that'll never happen if you're in control of the Enchanted Blades. Like if you wield that power.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just think that the thing with Kazan kind of complicates that, because, everything kind of points towards Japan, them wanting to establish Japan as the superpower with the Enchanted Blades. I'm not to say that Yura couldn't be from Shikoku. I just think it's kind of feels like going through hoops to see how that could be plausible right now, rather than what feels, at least right now, like the most more obvious thing, or at least more explained, or at least how we've been led to believe, right? I'll say it like that it's establishing Japan as the superpower with the Enchanted Blades. Kazan wanted that, Yura wanted that, and now he thinks, like I said earlier, that the Sword Saint is that's what he would have wanted. But yeah, I guess, like I said, Hokazono is really creative, man. I mean, you and me were also of the mind that Chihiro's mom wouldn't come into play, and introducing her younger brother definitely feels like it's setting up something, especially because I do want to point out just really quick what is Sword Saint's, I believe, last name, right? Soga. That is in like an old Japanese bloodline, if I'm not mistaken, unless the name is inverted here and Soga is his first name. I'm not too sure. This is an English translation, so Soga should be his last name. It could be, again, I don't know how much of that Hokazono's gonna lean into, what he's gonna do with that. But yeah, I wonder if like Chihiro's mom is now gonna come into play, or at least that bloodline. It could explain why Chihiro is, he has the Rokuhira eyes. Is there something that the Soga clan bloodline had that also makes Chihiro, that MC? So all I'm saying is that, there's things that we thought would go one way and they're going another. And it could very well happen with a bunch of other stuff, right? We never know.
Yeah, facts. And I'm leaning towards him not being from Shikoku, and it is probably the cope and bias in me, the Yura fanboy in me that, hopes that, he doesn't just like blindly, want to partner up with the Sword Saint. I mean, it could just be the fact of like, this is so out of left field for him, and having him, with, as a partner would make his plan easier. So, I could also see like that, also just being the case, that it's just not something that he thought was going to be possible, just because of like what he's endured this whole time. And considering the fact that he was chosen to wield an enchanted blade just as the same, type of person that like, Samura, for what it's worth, like he has a good heart. Uruha has a good heart. Like we see so far, the people that Kunishige's picked, they seem to have good hearts. So it would be like definitely throw you off the loop. When you meet this guy and you hear him talking about this is like ideology and beliefs to kill 200,000 people. And I guess, and it's more like maybe I could also be just playing too much into like the mystery of like, why doesn't Yura just, if he wants to side with him, why doesn't Yura just tell him like who he is? And that, like I said, I'm acknowledging that could just be looking too deep into that specific thing, because Azami does like interrupt towards the end. Like I said, I do lean more towards the Sword Saint making it out of this arc and Yura not, which sucks. But I mean, I didn't read Kagurabachi for Yura to begin with. It's just he is my favorite character, and I'll be happy to read it if he does get capped. But I just hope that there's a little bit more added to like this dynamic, which I do think there will be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I second that. Especially that last statement right there. Like like I said, there's moments in this chapter that I think, oh man, you're so fucked, man. And then there's other moments like when, like you said, the Sword Saint asks him who he is, and then the way that panel is just like framed and the way he's kind of like darkened, just that whole panel and like what he says makes me think that like I said earlier, we could just be getting started. This could be just you're getting. I mean, we know he got the gears in motion a long time ago, but like now he's actually making it happen. And that's why I said that like I could also see a scenario where they both walk out alive this chapter, not necessarily teaming up, but like, yeah, like I said, maybe Yura tries to backstab him. It doesn't go out his way, but it doesn't go his way, but Sword Saint doesn't get his hands on Magatsumi either. That's also something that opinions have been very split on, whether people think that the Sword Saint is or isn't getting his hands on Magatsumi, because if he does, like, it's GG's for everyone, right? And I know I even said that like Azami could open the window for that, right? And now even thinking about that right now is like, wait, but then how would he be stopped? Is Kagurabachi about to end in 50 chapters?
Or even he doesn't. We know the flowers are still blooming on Shikoku. Like, they've outright said those flowers. So those are manifestations of spirit energy. So we know the Sword Saint, he still has to have his spirit energy like in the Magatsumi sword. And I'm guessing the only reason why he can't actually use the sorcery is because of his like actual body, being like without any actual what his body actually needs to function. You know what I mean? Because that's a huge thing of like, why wouldn't he be able to just call the Magatsumi to him now, to him, to himself? And if the flowers are still blooming, because I think about the Rakuzaichi, the flowers that Kiora summoned aren't there no more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just might play into stuff that we don't know. I personally don't think there's a spirit energy of the Sword Saint that at least would allow him to like remote activate it like Yura's done, or like we've seen from Sojo and Hirohiko. I'm sorry, we haven't seen that from Hirohiko. From Sojo, I mean, we saw it from Chihiro, I believe, right? He did that. Yes,
yeah, with like the fish and the Rakuzaichi, just
yes. So I don't think the Sword Saint could do that. I think, man, there's a good chance that like the malediction in Shikoku could have a bit more to do with the Shinichi, the Magatsumi, other than like it'd have more to do with the Magatsumi itself rather than the Sword Saint. I know it was said that the Sword Saint's bloodlust hasn't waned, and that very well could be true, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean that that's the direct reason why the malediction is still going on in Shikoku. I just think that the Magatsumi is different. I've been saying that, and I think is the one enchanted blade that we know the least about. And when we know what it's really about, I think it's going to blow everyone away, and I think it's going to explain a lot of things that otherwise couldn't be explained, because we know that the true realm, the way it was explained, is that it goes beyond the theoretical, right? So that statement in itself is like everything goes. I've said this before. Apply that to the Magatsumi and we just don't know what we're dealing with. Like, at least that's how I see it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, if that's fair, it could just be a functionality of the power system or the Magatsumi specifically that we just aren't privy to yet. It just takes like literally one panel to bring us up to speed of like why this is or isn't the case for him remote activating it. Just let Hokuzono cook type of thing. Other than that, though, I mean, I do want to touch on like Azami pulling back up and then Shiba final panel with Azami pulling back up like he's Gojo or something. Definitely had aura. I have to give it to the man. He had aura pulling up. Azami really is a demon. He is about that action. Pulled up, he's pulling up with one arm, gets his other arm shot off instantly, but he's still like, taste the leather of my shoes. He just kicks Yura right in the face, which is crazy for anyone to like oppose someone with the Magatsumi's power like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Hey, like we're Hishaku. We're obviously on the side of Hishaku here. But like, nah, in all seriousness, Azami, man, shows up, shows out again. I love Azami, among my favorite characters, really. And like I said, he very well could still die. Maybe Yura does it, like maybe it's the Sword Saint. But just the fact that he gets to come back and have this moment, I'm not gonna lie, I am a bit worried in terms of like how Yura takes this kick, because we know he got caught like by a right hook of Azami's a couple of chapters back and kind of tanked it pretty well. But this is a kick to the face, and I don't know, we saw like what happened to Kazan, right? Like, I'm not saying Yura is anywhere like comparable to Kazan, right? That's not what I'm saying, but I think it's the first, like this is probably gonna be like the like nastiest hit he's taken in this fight, I would think. And so I wonder how he responds to it next chapter. Do you think we're gonna get like a more of this fight? Or like, do you think, not to kind of bring up Shiba, or do you think Shiba saves the day, or what?
Well, for one, watching yourself get kicked in the face is crazy. Like, you're like looking at the foot all the way through, like, oh, this shit's about to land. But no, I think we're cutting away here. I think Azami, the best case scenario is he stalls out for help to arrive. I don't think that's the case. I think Azami's most likely dying here, but a valiant effort, respect, 100%. But I just I can't see how like him full powered with the help of two sword masters, didn't get the job done, and then I expect him now with zero hands and getting the job done. You know what I mean?
That is a good point, and that's why I wonder if, like, I mean, I don't know if it's safe to say that he caught Yura off guard, because Yura definitely had time to get ready, but we know he fucking misses that, what looks to be like a point-blank shot, just completely misses it, and that's why I'm so intrigued as of, like, how Yura's gonna respond to this kick, because if he takes it well, then yeah, GG's for Azami, there's no doubt about that, because of what you just said. But if we end up with a situation where, like,
if Yura loses to somebody with no hands, I'm gonna be pissed.
Literally no hands, right? Like, imagine that. That's a crazy statement, right?
That would be the only way for me to like actually have issues, like to like start next episode with like ranting. It would be him losing to somebody with no hands. Or you know what? Maybe Ikuto. No, I was about to say maybe him and Ikuto. They merged together to create a full. Let me stop.
Oh man, but I do like how Yura calls him a walking corpse, and Azami goes like, might as well become a demon. This is the executioner we're talking about, right? It looks like not anymore. He's a demon now, so I do like that. Like you said, if he does go out here, valiant effort, man, because this is what it's about.
I mean, him and that bulging eye of his, like that dude, that's what is it, 11 yen fent. That's what he's on, that 11 yen fent. Because that boy's eyes that's a perk 30 hitting my boy. But it is cool getting to see his sorcery, like when he's first coming down, you see the coins like around him and stuff like that. Those are just like really cool things to see, that makes those moments like feel like have substance to them. And I mean, the last thing with the chapter is this Shiba panel looking at a phone that ain't ringing. I can make all the Shiba jokes in the world right now, and trust me, it comes naturally. But realistically, I talked to Dice a bit about this before we start recording, that Shiba and Chihiro, could still technically get in contact with each other. Chihiro knows what's going on because the Masumi got that scroll. When Samura opened his eyes in that chapter, we find out they got a scroll to like tell them what the state of the situation was. So if Chihiro is able to, get in contact with Chihiro get in contact with Shiba, then it does make sense for Shiba to like pull up, and that would definitely like move the masses if Shiba pulls up.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. It's about time. Look at Azami, bro. Poor Azami fucking, putting his life on the line. Shiba out here chilling. Obviously I know he's, watching out, protecting Subaru or whatever. But yeah, I agree, man. I think we could finally be about to see Shiba in action. And I think that could very well open the doors for a Subaru official introduction. And then potentially dying too, because there's Kaguri walking around with an enchanted blade, and I expect him to come back into the story soon. And it could be the perfect setup where like Shiba abandons Subaru or leaves him unprotected or whatever. He could leave some fodder to watch for him. We know how as good as he would be as good as dead if that's the case.
He should. If he was smart, he would teleport over to where Hiyuki is, because he should be privy of that information.
That is smart what you're saying. Yeah, and drop off Subaru
to Hiyuki and let her just watch over, because she's gonna be stronger than anyone else that can, unless they let Samura swap places with Shiba or something.
No, that's a good point. That would, yeah. So you know what? Like, thanks for bringing that up, because if Shiba doesn't do that and it costs Subaru's life, this is what I'm a quote. So I appreciate that, because if he doesn't do what you just said, Shiba's a fraud for real.
Hey, brother. Anytime I can contribute to Shiba slander, I'm down.
I don't even hate on Shiba. He's all right.
Gas chapter for sure. We spent a lot of time just talking about obviously the Sword Saint, but that is the chapter. There's so many different ways it can go. And the last thing I want to say, and this will be my closing thoughts, is that Hishaku is still the thing that I'm worried like pulling some like dumb shit and like ruining my stocks in Kagurabachi. I'm cool with it. Like I said, I let Hokuzono cook first and foremost. But just as like a biased fan, he's the one I hate the most. And if he like just like screws over Yura to help the Sword Saint out.
Oh my God! Shut up! Stop it!
But what you got?
No, in regards to Hishaku, I do agree with that. He is the one Hishaku member who seems to be almost as important as Yura. He's been present in a lot of big moments, right? And yeah, I agree with you. He's the one guy that the fact that it's him and Best Genius names who haven't been revealed yet, but Hishaku's relevance and importance is like I said, is the only one that can be compared to like Yura in terms of what he seems to be in charge of in the Hishaku. Like his Pine Sorcery is like the most utilized. So yeah, I am a bit sussed out in regards to what Hishaku might pull. I am honest, like I'll be honest, I didn't think of what you just said, him like potentially having stocks in the Sword Saint or on the Sword Saint this whole time. So yeah, now you got me thinking in regards to that. Last thing I want to shout out is just that I do enjoy how, last thing we see from Azami, like I said, is, might as well become a demon. But I do like how the one thing he has on his mind is the reason why he's doing all this, and that's Chihiro. And he recalls to what looks like that night or day that Kunishige was murdered, and it was Azami and Shiba that were there to comfort Chihiro. I can only imagine like, what could have tried to say or whatever. So it's just I do like that, man. Again, like in all seriousness, Azami is a very cool character, and it's these kind of moments that only make them like make him go all that much higher for me. I mean, he's already like top of the list of, like I said, my favorite characters, but this is
he's
just
in my
what I
top
like to see.
5. You know, he's definitely like
Yeah,
every
he's there,
chance
he's around there.
every time every moment he has to step up on panel, he does. You know.
Yep.
And even when you think he might be gone for a while, he comes back the next chapter and aura farms and go, balls out. But I mean, that's all I have to say for chapter 100. I really enjoyed this chapter, and man, it was a doozy. I'm looking forward to see the next 100.
Yeah, man, I agree. It was even like, just talking about it felt like a I don't want to say like a challenge, but it was just so much here to address, unpack. Just a big chapter all around. I couldn't have been like more satisfied in what Hokuzono did with this big 100, so very happy for that. And I'm also like really interested in what people think is going to happen. You and me, like, we gave a couple of our theories and ideas of where we think this might be headed, but like always, I genuinely want to know what people think, especially in regards to that Sword Saint and Yura potential team up. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, man. I think you brought it up. The fact of this episode being kind of a challenge, or not necessarily a challenge because we're just talking about a chapter of manga, but this was a more difficult episode, I think, to wrap our minds around, because me and you aren't the types to like read a chapter and then just take it for as it's presented. We weigh out like the things we saw prior, and or things that been kind of like hinted at. Like we kind of try to weigh everything and look at each different avenue, so it does kind of like make it hard for us sometimes to formulate, our own like, or just to kind of get it out, just to say it and voice our own opinions or thoughts sometimes, because we are trying to like weigh, instead of just like reviewing the chapter itself and like what it stands for, we're also like have so much different things we're juggling, which mental gymnastics essentially. But that's how we are. And this chapter just was a lot of like mental gymnastics for me specifically. I don't want to speak for you, but like just like, oh well, if I say this, that could also mean this or that, or that could,
No, I feel that. I mean, for me, it's more like, though I can't, like I said, I definitely feel that Hokuzono just, man, he does a great job of just throwing a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff at you. And so you kind of have to be very careful, and us when we're talking about the chapter and like how we navigate all these things, right? And also like not falling the trap of like theory crafting too easily, right? Or too quick, right? And just kind of take the chapter for what it is at first, and then kind of start digging and diving into like those connections, like you said, those older theories, those observations that we've made in the past. And that's when it really becomes a challenge, when you start making all those connections. But like you said, man, this is what we do. This is what we enjoy like doing here at the pod, and I look forward to it every single week, man. And this is honestly like the perfect story to do this with, because every single week we find what to talk about for damn near a whole hour, right? So again, man, enough credit. I mean, enough credit does go to Hokuzono, but let's give him more. Let's give him more credit, because
get the honey out.
Yeah, get the honey out again. But that would be all from me, man. Banger chapter. Couldn't be more satisfied.
Well said. Well, all right, guys. There is a chapter next week, so we'll be back for 101 Dalmatians. I just watched that movie earlier this morning. That's why it's in my head. Okay. But looking forward to seeing what 101 brings us. Make sure to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comment section how you feel about the chapter. And, as Dice asked earlier about the dynamic of Yura and the Sword Saint. And until next time, peace.
Peace.